Hello there, my name is Payal Naraine and welcome to this video series. यहाँ हम कवर कर रहे हैं पूनम दलाल दहिया की एंशिएंट एंड मेडिवल इंडिया की थर्ड एडिशन, जो कि लेटेस्ट एडिशन है। इस किताब को हम थ्रूली रीड करेंगे और जहाँ ज़रूरत पड़ेगी वहाँ हम साथ ही साथ यूपीएससी एंड स्टेट सर्विसेज में आए हुए प्रीवियस ईयर के क्वेश्चंस भी डिस्कस करेंगे। एंड इस सीरीज़ में वीडियोस लगभग 30 to 35 मिनट्स के होंगे, बड़े इफेक्टिव होंगे और हम ऑलमोस्ट 40 to 45 लेक्चर्स में ये पूरी किताब कवर करेंगे। और अगर आपने ये सीरीज़ 3 to 4 टाइम्स देख ली तो बिल्कुल ये किताब आपके दिमाग में छप जाएगी एंड ट्रस्ट मी, आपकी एक्यूरेसी भी काफ़ी इंक्रीज़ हो जाएगी। साथ ही साथ आपका रिवीजन भी काफ़ी आसान हो जाएगा। सो अगर आपको रिवीजन के साथ साथ वैल्यू एडिशन भी करना है तो ये सीरीज़ पूरी फॉलो करें। आपको बस आपके पास ये किताब रखकर मुझे सुनना है एंड मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स मार्क करने हैं। So without any further delay, let's get started. Hello there, welcome back to the channel Ghatna Sutra. यहाँ हम कवर कर रहे हैं पूनम दलाल दहिया की एंशिएंट एंड मेडिवल इंडिया थर्ड एडिशन, जो कि लेटेस्ट एडिशन है। और हमने लास्ट वीडियो में कवर कर लिया था वैदिक लिटरेचर पुरानास एंड नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट धर्मशास्त्र। एंड बिफोर मूविंग अहेड, आप यहाँ पे ध्यान दीजिएगा कि धर्मशास्त्र के ऊपर बीपीएससी में 1994 में इस पर सवाल पूछा गया था। सो स्टार मार्क दिस। Dharmashastra. Dharmashastras are the Sanskrit texts dealing specifically with dharma, code of conduct that conceptually signifies a righteous moral law, which is in consonance with the universal natural law. Dharma also refers to the fulfillment of purusharthas, life goals, such as dharma, righteous conduct, artha, material well-being, kama, sensual pleasure, and mokshas, liberation from the cycle of life and death. The Dharmashastras are further subdivided into Dharma Sutras, composed during 600 to 300 BCE, and Smritis, composed during 200 BCE to 900 CE. They recognizes three sources of dharma, namely the Vedas, Shruti, Smriti, that which is remembered text, and Shishtachar, good mannerism, and practice of decent cultured people. A person's dharma was dependent on many factors such as gender, material status, varna, and ashram. Out of the four varnas, three varnas, that is Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, were considered Dvija, twice born, as they had the right to the sacred thread ceremony, considered akin to a second birth, while the Shudras were burdened with many civil disabilities. The four ashrams dividing the life of a Dvija male were Brahmacharya, celibate studenthood; Grihastha, household caretaker; Vanaprastha, partial renunciation. Excuse me. Sannyasa, complete renunciation. It should be noted that the different ashram stages were not followed periodically by all. It was not even applicable to women or Shudras. Epics. The two Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, are the part of both oral and written traditional history. The link between the Puranas and the epic is that the heroes and the clans who are the actors in the epic are the descendant of Manu's progeny. The two epics were clearly aware of each other, as the Mahabharata had a section called Ramopakhyana, detailing the story of Rama, and the Ramayana mentions the Kurus and Hastinapur but does not mention the Mahabharata war. Mahabharata, like before we go ahead with this, आप यहाँ पे ध्यान दीजिएगा कि महाभारत के ऊपर स्टेट सर्विसेज में सवाल पूछा गया था। यूपी की स्टेट सर्विस में यूपी आरओ टू नेम अ फ्यू, है ना। और महाभारत को जय संहिता भी कहा जाता है। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट विथ महाभारता वॉर एंड रामायण। महाभारत, roughly composed between 400 BCE to 400 CE, the Mahabharata is said to be composed by Ved Vyas, consists of 18 parvas, books, and has around 1 lakh verses. It is considerably longer than Ramayana. Traditionally, the war is believed to have happened in the Dwapar Yuga, but historians consider the events and social characters of the Mahabharata corresponding to the earlier stage of development than the Ramayana, as Mahabharata's setting pertains to the Indo-Gangetic divide and Upper Ganga Valley. Ramayana, roughly composed between 400 BCE to 300 CE. Ramayana is considered as the Adi Kavya, first conscious poetry, composed by Valmiki. and it consists of 7 Kans books having around 24,000 verses. It is much shorter than the Mahabharata despite later edition. Traditionally, it is considered that Rama lived in a Treta Yuga, that is earlier than the Mahabharata. Since the setting of Ramayana shifted eastwards of the Middle Ganga Valley, the language of Ramayana is more polished and its concepts are more closely related to the later societies. Historians consider it of a later stage than the Mahabharata. Varied aspects of ऋग्वेदिक कल्चर. अब आप इस पे ध्यान दीजिएगा कि ऋग्वेदिक कल्चर के ऊपर यूपीएससी 2017 में सवाल पूछा गया था. सो स्टार मार्क दिस. Vedic aspect of Rigvedic culture. Based on the inference drawn from the different Rigvedic hymns, the political, social, and economic aspect of Rigvedic life are as discussed further. The political life of Rigvedic Aryans. Rigvedic society was a tribal society and its people lived in a semi-nomadic life. Since the concept of state was absent, a definite territorial identity was absent. Aryan tribes were called Janas. Their chief Rajan was also known as Gopati or Gopa, protector of cows. And the chief queen was called the Mahisi. The Janas often had conflict with the Panis, who used to hide the cattle of Aryans in the forest and were thus deemed the enemies of Aryans. In order to get their cattle back, the Vedic god Indra was invoked and many battles known as Gavishti, Gavashna, Goshu and Gavyut to search for cows were fought between the Aryans and the Panis. The main functions of the Rajan was to protect the Jana and the cattle from the enemies, along with offering prayers to God on behalf of the Jana. Certain aspects related to polity and administration. So before we start that, यहाँ पे जो some important tribal assemblies के बारे में बताया गया है, इसके ऊपर स्टार मार्क दिस, लाइक क्योंकि स्टेट सर्विसेज में पूछा गया था झारखंड की, यूपी की स्टेट सर्विसेज में, right? So star mark this and remember these things, okay? Okay, let's start. Certain aspects related to polity and administration. The society's political structure was somewhat similar to the monarchical form, but the Gopati's office was not hereditary, and he was selected from among the clansmen, and was perhaps elected by the assembly called Samiti. Thus, democratic elements and republican polity were present in the political life of the Rigvedic times. Some important tribal assemblies of this period were Sabha, smaller body meant for elite, exclusive body. Samiti, broad-based folk assembly presided over by Rajan. Vidhata, tribal assemblies with diverse functions such as distributing war booty among the members of the tribe. Gana, highest advisory body. Parishad, legislative body where common issues were discussed. The polity was liberal and progressive and egalitarian in character, as there was hardly any difference in political status of common people and political functionaries. In fact, the power and prestige of the crown was not so high, and his main role was to lead the tribe during the offensive and defensive battles. Other functions of the states were yet to emerge. Some important functionaries of Rigvedic societies were Purohit, priest. The Purohita assisted and advised the chief on various matters. In exchange for their ritualistic service, the priest received dana, gifts, and dakshina, sacrificial offering. Senani, chief of army. Gramini, leader of the village and fighting unit. Vrajapati, officer who controls the territory. It is pertinent to note that there is no mention of any officer for administering justice, though Rigvedic society was not an ideal society, as there were cases of theft and burglary. Similarly, there is no evidence of tax collecting officers, and it perhaps seems that the people offered to the chief a voluntary contribution called Bali. Vedic society was a militaristic and military technique was much advanced, as they possessed chariot driven by horses. The Rigvedic charioteers used varma, coat of mail, and sipra / siranastra, helmets, and went to combat equipped with assi, sword, hunts, arrows, and Ilhinus bows. The Sena was not a permanent fighting group and consist of able-bodied tribesmen who were mobilized at the time of wars, and later the king redistributed the tribute and booty collected from the war among them. Cattle lifting was the most common type of conflict. The Aryans were engaged in two types of battles, with pre-Aryans probably referred to them as Dasas or Dasayus. Among themselves, there have been mention of two such battles. A battle occurred between a Bharata king Devadas, winner, and Dasa ruler Sambhara. The Battle of 10 Kings, Dashrajana. This was fought between the Bharata chief Sudas, grandson of Devadas, winner, on one side, and 10 other tribesmen, including the famous 5 tribes, Panjana, namely the Yadus, Turvasha, Puru, Anu, and Dhruayu, on the bank of the river Purushani, Ravi. Later, the Bharatas joined hand with the Purus to form the Kuru tribe, who further allied with Panchalas and established their control over the upper Ganga valley. Social life of Rigvedic Aryans. So, मार्क दिस इम्पॉर्टेंट क्योंकि इसके ऊपर यूपीएससी के मेंस में सवाल पूछा गया था, राइट. एंड प्रोबेबिलिटी इज़ हायर कि इसके ऊपर शायद प्रीलिम्स में दोबारा सवाल पूछा जाए क्योंकि यूपीएससी मेंस में पूछा गया था. सोशल लाइफ ऑफ ऋग्वेदिक आर्यंस. All the social units were based on brotherhood. Kula, family, was the basic social unit, and Kulapa was the head of the family who also represented the member of the family in political activities. Largely, they were joint families in the Rigvedic age, which followed the patrilineal system. A number of families together constitute Grama, and Gramini was the head, who were the part of large grouping called Vis or clan headed by Vishpati. One or more than one clan made Jana or tribe. The Jana was the largest social unit and the highest political unit was headed by Janesha or Gopati, who was equivalent to a king. Certain aspects related to the Rigvedic society. The society was patriarchal in nature, though the women had important position in the society since they were educated and had access to the assembly. Women like Apala, Ghosha, Lopamudra and Vishwara composed hymns and received upanyayas. Women attended the meetings of the Vidhata. Girls were free to choose their life partners and there was no instance of child marriage, Sati or Parda in the Rigveda. There were, though few instances of levirate, marrying the husband's younger brother on the death of husband, and widow remarriage. Marriage was usually monogamous, though some reference of polygyny and polyandry are also found in Rigveda. However, interestingly, in the Rigveda, no desire is expressed for daughter, though the desire for children and cattle is recurrent theme in the hymns. One of the probable reasons behind preference for the birth of a son was because of the martial nature of the society, which requires male members for their clashes to establish dominance over the territories. The society was not divided on caste lines and occupation and was not based on birth. Everyone, be it the Rajans, the Purohits or the artisans, etc., was a part of the clan network and the member of the family could adopt different occupation. This is indicated by the following verse in the Rig Veda: I am a poet, my father is a physician, and my mother grinds grain upon the stone. Striving for wealth with varied plans, we follow our desire like cattle. Thus, social mobility was very high order, as person could change their varna status by changing their profession. However, certain differences did exist during the period. Varna or color was the basic of initial differentiation. Between the Vedic and non-Vedic people, the Vedic people were fair, whereas the non-Vedic indigenous people were dark in complexion and spoke a different language. Authors of Rig Veda distinguished themselves from other groups whom they called Dyasus or Dasas. The Dasas were also excuse me. The Dasas were also referred as Avarta, who do not obey the ordinance of God, or Akratu, those who do not perform sacrifice. The Aryans were more hostile towards Dyasus than the Dasas, probably due to the fact that Dyasus were non-Aryan indigenous people, while Dasas were the early Aryan group who had lost their skin color to some extent due to intermarriages with the indigenous people. Thus, even though a socially organized Varna system was not prevalent and the tribal element was stronger in the society, yet Rigvedic society can still not be considered a totally egalitarian society, as social stratification was based on the division of labor and gender. The only mention of four Varnas was found in Purusha Sukta of the 10th Mandal of the Rigveda, which marked one conclude that the Varna system was probably introduced at the end of Rigvedic age, and that there was social mobility and the absence of strict social hierarchy. However, the Rigvedic people were familiar with slavery. Rigvedic economy. Since the Rigvedic society was a pastoral society, cattle rearing was the dominant activity. The chief measure of wealth was cattle, and a wealthy man was known as Gomat. That is to say, one who owned many cattle. A large number of words are derived from the word go, meaning cow. It is pertinent to note that even the donation to the priest were mainly cows and women slaves, but not land, which reveals the importance of pastoralism. Evidence of trade and commerce is meager, and there was no concept of private property based on land ownership. The clan as a whole enjoyed right over the resources. So certain aspects of Rigvedic economy. Okay, so star mark this, like double star mark this, क्योंकि UPPCS में दो बार सवाल पूछा गया है इसके ऊपर in 2005 and in 2007. So make sure you remember this and mark this in your copies too. Let's start. Certain aspects related to Rigvedic economy. The unit of currency was Nishka, which was made up of gold. Barter was the model of exchange, and the cow was an important unit of value. There was no regular revenue system, and the kingdom was maintained by the voluntary tribute Bali of subjects and bounty won in the battle. Gift exchanges and redistribution had an important economic role in the Rigvedic society. Such exchange, known as prestations, were done not on an individual level but at a group level. Apart from economic goods, this also includes the exchange of other things such as women, courtesies, hospitality, and military assistance. Shifting agriculture was practiced, and fire was used to burn down forest cover, and the patch of land thus cleared was then sown. Apart from Yava or barley, no other grain is mentioned. The field was known as Kshetra, and the term Rishi referred to ploughing. The Rigvedic people used wooden plough, Pala, Langala, and Sira. Vedic god Indra is also described as Urvarajit, winner of fertile fields, and there are also references to Kshetrapati, guardian deity of agricultural field. The term Ayas in the Rig Veda refers to copper and bronze and not iron. Thus, they did not use iron technology but were familiar with copper. Also, there have been very less reference to metallurgical activities. A lot of other craft such as cart making, carpentry, tanning, sewing, weaving find mention, though the chariot makers enjoyed a special status in the Rigvedic society. Chariot racing and dice gambling were popular pastimes. For transport, bullock carts, horses, and horse-drawn chariot were used. There are also references to the sea, samudra, and boat. Now, Rigvedic religion. अच्छा, so star mark this, like 3 star mark this, and because ये अलग अलग स्टेट सर्विसेज में पूछा गया था यूपी की एग्जामिनेशंस में, और इस पे यूपीएससी मेंस में भी सवाल पूछा गया था in 2023. So mark this as highly important and make sure you remember this. Rigvedic religion. There was neither temple nor idol worship in the early Vedic age. The Rig Veda reflects naturalistic polytheism, similar to primitive animism. as they venerated natural forces like the wind, rain, water, thunder, etc. Very few temple divinities were venerated. They generally worshipped in the open air through yajnas. Vedic text refers to meat eating and also the sacrificial killing of animals except the cows, which was considered aghanya, not to be killed, a peculiar case of henotheism or katenotheism is found in Rigvedic religion, wherein the deity being involved in a particular hymn is considered the supreme god. Other peculiar feature of Rigvedic religion were as follows. Rituals and ceremony, though formed the crux of the Vedic religion, they were simple in nature, devoid of any rigidities or complexities. Also, they were performed mainly for attainments of materialistic goals like for attracting victory in battlefield, for cattle wealth, and for more sons. There were no exclusive monopoly of Brahmanas in the priestly class. Rather, there were 16 other categories of priestly class other than Brahmins. Also, the role of priestly class was not too important in religious life, and even the householders was considered priest of 17 category who could perform all rituals and sacrifices. The philosophical elements were in the nascent stage of development during the Rigvedic age. In fact, the concept of soul and salvation emerged much later. Male deities enjoyed higher status than female deities. Some of the deities worshipped by Rigvedic people are as follows. So now we are going to talk about Rigvedic gods. But make sure, mark this extremely important, like star mark it, like 3 stars, because UPSC प्रीलिम्स में 2017 में पूछा गया था, यूपी PCS में मल्टीपल ईयर्स में पूछा गया था, एंड इवन इन उत्तराखंड PCS में भी पूछा गया in 2016. So make sure you remember the Rigvedic gods. Let's start. Indra, greatest god of the Aryans. 250 hymns are attributed to him, called Purandara, breaker of oaths, Maghavana, bounteous, and Vritihana, slayers of Vrita chaos. Agni, second most important god, the god of fire. 200 hymns are attributed to him, the son of earth and heaven, intermediary between the gods and the men. Varuna, third most important god, the god of personified water, looked after Rita or the cosmic order. Ethically, the highest of all Rigvedic god. Soma, god of plant, king of gods, special god of the Brahmanas. All hymns of the 9th mandal assigned to him. Aryans knew Himalaya, Manujavat, as a source of Soma plant. Considered the wise god who inspired the poets to compose hymns. Yama, lord of death. Rudra, Amrol archer, god whose arrows brought diseases, lived in the mountains and the gardens of healing herbs, resembled Greek god Apollo and identified as Proto-Shiva. अच्छा, अब आप यहाँ पे ध्यान दीजिएगा, अलग अलग स्टेट सर्विसेज में सवाल पूछा गया था उन गायत्री मंत्र, जैसे कि BPSC